Hello, everybody. We are live. We are on Carnivore Ramblings with the wonderful Jerome Armstrong and, of course, Jonathan, and myself, Sophie, in case you all didn't know my name by now. How is everybody today?
We're testing out the video through the mobile phone today, just to see if the video quality is any good and the audio quality is any good. So we're going to look back at this, and it's mainly for testing reasons, but it seems to be working so far. Okay. I will be moving the camera around a lot. But the important thing is that I'm heard.
Yes.
Hopefully, and Sophie's also heard. And Jerome has excellent quality audio and video as usual, so he's got no issues.
It's then good to see if we can do it on the go. If for any reason we're not at home when it's live time, like you could even be live while I'm driving home or something, if it's, that time and we just haven't made it back. So yeah, all experimental purposes, isn't it?
Yeah, I've realised as well that the only limitation with just using a phone when I'm going between my house and Sophie's is that if I'm typing up lots of things for different projects that I'm working on, it's a pain to do it on the phone. That's the only limitation. Yeah. I can make all my films on my phone quite easily.
Yes. How are you today, Jerome? You all good?
Doing well. We had a lot of snow over here starting yesterday. So most of my clients today ended up rescheduling yesterday. So yesterday was almost 12-hour day, and I'm all done today. I only had 2 clients. So I'm very grateful, very thankful for the opportunity to join you two. And I think I'm going to knock off a little bit early today.
Good. Why not? It's Friday. Wait, it is Friday for him, isn't it?
Yeah, he's a few hours behind.
I never know time differences.
About 2 o'clock in it, or 1 o'clock your way.
Yeah, 1 o'clock. I'm 6 hours behind you guys.
Oh, right, that's fine.
I need to remember that. I need to remember when Pim and Bart are when they are in the world. And there's a few other people as well.
Oh yeah, I'm so bad with time zones. Right, I'm just reading the chat from my phone in case people are wondering what I'm doing, just so I don't knock the phone too much. Right, so we've got Rick in the house. He's got his lunch, probably an iguana, let's be honest. Zbigniew is here. Jamie's here. How did your consultation go, Jamie? All good?
Yeah, hey Jamie, nice to speak to you earlier. Enjoyed that.
And Matthew?
Very, very good questions as well. That's always
good.
Makes it stimulating for me, which is quite nice.
And Matthew is in the house. Hello.
Hey Matthew, how's it going?
We're going to send this your way to test things.
Yeah.
Good audio and video from Zbigniew. Good, that's what we want.
So just use my mobile phone I've been using for 32 British pounds for the last year or so, rather than spending hundreds on webcams and microphones and laptops.
It's annoying, but I suppose until you do it, you just don't know. And I would have thought a phone's sound quality would be worse than what's supposed to be a 4K webcam. So until you get there, you just don't know. Who else have we got? No questions at the minute. Get them in, guys. We've got Darkfield Carnivore. He's here. Lambs is in the house as well. Get your questions in.
Very good.
You can specify who they're for, whether they're for myself, Jonathan, or Jerome. You just, put question and then who you want to answer it. Or if you don't put a specific name, then it'll be a free-for-all and we'll just all on.
Yeah, these are always enjoyable to when myself, Jerome, and Sophie connect. I enjoy this a lot because you don't often get an opportunity with the time zones and things. So it's nice to speak, and it takes a bit of pressure off me as well because I'm a bit slow at the moment, and I'm just trying to stay dedicated to my cause and be persistent. Best way I can do that right now is from the comfort of my bedroom.
Exactly. Jamie says, thanks for today. Jonathan, help me out.
Appreciate it.
Good.
Cheers, Jamie.
Oh, I'm going to so butcher some of these names. I do apologise. Daduya. Good afternoon. Hello.
Good afternoon.
Must be a newbie. I don't think I've seen that name before. Welcome. How's your prep coming along, Jerome, for your contest?
It's going well. My sleep has been terrible. I've started hitting that point where I'm having nightmares that I'm going to the fridge and eating food that I shouldn't eat. And Sophie, I don't know if you saw the pictures. I sent Jonathan some pictures last night of how barren and empty my fridge and my freezer are. There's almost nothing in it. I kind of have to get to that point so I don't So that when I wake
Go
up,
off
I know
track.
that I didn't eat anything I shouldn't have eaten. But it's going well. There's a lot that's going into it. I apologize. I think I'm a little bit red. My Irish blood doesn't always like tanning. But I understand the necessity of having to try and get a bit of a base tan getting ready for a show.
Yeah, the skin quality is very important for people like us. So when you probably wouldn't know this, but when you're shaving a tanning, you're doing this like 2 weeks in advance. Well, sorry, the shaving itself and the skin buffering, I call it. So basically, it's just like exfoliating. Just don't cut your skin like I always do. I've got lots of scars from shaving.
Well, and the texture of your skin changes a bit too as you tan, and it's interesting in that regard. And there's a weird combination of like sunlight plus tanning beds that you can kind of strike a balance with both. But I guess it's hard to explain to people who may not have competed before.
Yeah, I think you can hold some inflammation if you tan too much.
Yep.
When I was doing sunbeds religiously before a contest, I think I started about 3 months out. I was doing, I believe, 3 per week for 12 minutes. I'm pretty much immune to the sun nowadays, so I can do long periods of time in the sunbeds. But yeah, I did notice when I initially started it, I had a bit of inflammation, so I was holding a bit of water. I was slightly blurrier, but when it eventually came off, it is quite a dramatic effect.
Nice. Well, I think our first question from Darkfield Carnivore: should I hurt to the point of limited movement the next day after a workout, or am I going too hard?
I think it depends what limited movement he means. If he's stuck in bed like I am, I probably say it's a bad workout. Maybe he's done a bit too much.
Maybe pushed it that little bit too hard.
I mean, if you had a hard leg day and you can move stuff, but it's just muscular soreness. When I say muscular soreness, I mean not tearing a muscle. Then I think you'd be fine. It could just be that you've done a workout, it's novel stimulus to you, and you're not used to it. Other than that, I think that, we know that muscular soreness kind of indicates that you've trained hard. It doesn't necessarily mean that you've allocated yourself towards the appropriate muscular stimulus. So you might have overdone it. So you might have dug into your recovery. So maybe that didn't have to do that extra 10% in the gym. You could have done 10% less.
Yeah.
But what do you think, Drew?
Yeah, I think there's something like 12 different suggested mechanisms that kind of underpin soreness. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of a double-edged sword. Usually you like feeling a little bit sore because you feel like you did a good job in the gym, but it's oftentimes, when it's hard getting out of bed the next morning because everything hurts, it's not quite so fun. Should you be sore? Not necessarily. I tend to think, depending on, if you're fairly consistent with your training routine, soreness, I think, largely dissipates after, maybe 4 to 6 weeks. Something about switching up movements every now and then can lend itself towards being more sore. But the way I look at it, it's kind of a side effect of training. Sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't. If you're sore to the point where it's negatively affecting your overall quality of life and your ability to do things you enjoy, there's a lot of variables in that. Maybe you did a little bit too much volume. It could have pushed the intensity possibly a little too high. Could be sleep and diet related. So I would lean slightly yes, that if you're that sore, there's probably something that you need to dial back a little bit.
I've noticed over the years, like for myself, when I've trained quite hard and I've got sore, it's mainly when I've, when I actually like squeeze my chest over like that, squeeze my pecs together. That's when I think, well, that's a bit sore. That's a soreness level that I'm okay with. I think that's quite normal for me, even as an advanced trainer. But I think if you're sore, like you're moving your arm up and like you move your arm back and everything's like red, raw, like you've just burnt yourself, then that's a bit troublesome, I think. But it doesn't mean you won't grow from it. It just means you're finding yourself, have you done too much or have you not?
Yeah.
Quite
and
subjective.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you don't get muscular soreness, it doesn't mean that you haven't trained hard enough. Because some people just don't get like the muscular soreness or the, you're walking up the stairs after leg day and it's a little bit tricky. Some people just don't get that, but that doesn't mean that they haven't trained hard enough. Because I know that I've heard people say, well, if you're not sore, you've not trained, properly. And it's like, well, everyone's body's different, but am I right in saying that?
I think you're right. Yeah. I mean, I notice myself if I'm quite physically active, meaning I'm able to walk around a lot during the day. My blood circulatory system isn't completely idle outside of normal autonomous function. Then perhaps I'm less sore. So it means if I'm able, for example, on an average day to do 2,000 steps, I'm very sedentary. Then maybe not so good. If I'm being a bit more active before a contest preparation and I'm bodybuilding, I might do 4, 5, 6,000 steps, maybe more. I don't know. And I notice my inflammation is a bit less. So it kind of suggests to me it could be a number of different things. So it could be confounding factors such as the fact I'm getting more sunlight. Am I out in nature more? Does that make me feel better? My inflammation's lower because I feel better. Then there's also the fresh air part of it. Maybe that's part of it as well. So it's lots of different things.
Yeah.
And I would just piggyback on what Sophie said, that the only objective measure of essentially, like, if everything was dialed in correctly, is the next time you go back in the gym, how does that workout number and performance relate to your previous workout? You could be really sore, you could not be sore at all. It's completely independent of whether or not you've actually triggered the growth mechanism and then have allowed it the time and recovery that it needs to overcompensate with growth.
Yeah, I was listening to half listening earlier to Mike Mentz's ramblings for about an hour and a half, and he said basically the same thing. We kind of already know this, people like Drew and myself, we already know this kind of thing. Like, we got stronger because we know strength correlates very closely with muscular size. If we're sore, we could be sore a million times over, but we might not gain any muscle. But we know a muscle has to by default be a bit bigger in order to tolerate with the extra load. For example, an elephant will have a lot of mass and it's got to carry around a fat ass all day. So, you know,
good juicy peach all day.
Good juicy peach.
Wonderful. Well, hopefully that has answered your question.
Very good question.
So, Rick, I have to bring it close to my eyesight. Geez. I would never understand why bodybuilders have to shave their skin and tan. It's just insane. I suppose each to their own, and if that's what they enjoy doing because they enjoy the contest, then it's
pageantry at the end of the day. It's a form of artwork. It'd be like, for example, you might look at the Mona Lisa and say, "Oh, I don't like that style. It's too bland. It's not very colourful." But it's quite a realistic sort of painting. But then you might look at Picasso and say, "Oh, it's fantastic. It's bright. It's contrasting. It's impactful. It stimulates my mind," and this, that, and the other. Bodybuilding is subjective, and not everyone's going to like it. And it is, at the end of the day, you're just trying to show something.
Yeah.
You show things best in their cleanest form, I find. So when I've seen people on stage with, like, basically where they've tanned and they've tanned before, yeah, he knows. When they've tanned before and they've then used the urinal or they sat down, they've not laid down some toilet paper beneath them when they're sitting. They'll get some splashback on some occasions, and they'll have white dots all over the backside of their legs.
Oh no!
That is a bad presentation.
Yeah,
it happens.
It does happen. Jeremy, you're like this. I was in the back of we have something over here. It's a bit like the steakhouse over in your sort of side of the world, but it's called the Harvester, and it's a restaurant. So you can get like grilled chicken, steaks, ribs, mash, things like that, potatoes, whatever, salad cut. When you get that, basically, I was in Wales with my brother, and we were looking for like somewhere to top up my tan. Went to the disabled access toilets.
Sure.
My brother was in there with me. He locked the door, and we had our suitcase with my tan equipment. He's just like rolling me on backside with this tan equipment, like sponges and things. That's what happens backstage and in bodybuilding competitions and the days around it, and it's quite the hardest process in bodybuilding. The thing I dislike most, if anything, is the tanning.
That didn't look suspicious at all, did it? You going into a toilet with your brother?
Two big, muscular, 6 foot plus men.
Well,
going into a cubicle together.
With the tanning, you can't quite get everything yourself, so you need at least one other person. And so you find out really quickly who your friends are. Because you basically, you can wear your posing trunks, you could wear swim trunks and get most of it, but it's usually just easier I always laid a bunch of newspaper down in my bathtub and I would stand naked in the bathtub and get what I could. And I had my then wife help me out. And like, that was our night. We would turn on music and just coat a tan on, and then let it dry, shower off the excess. Once I would air dry, then we put another coat on, and it was just this all night thing. And after a while, you just kind of get tired of it. So to me, yeah, I'm 100% with the tanning and the shaving too. I can't stand the shaving. So I'm with you a little bit on that one, Rick.
Yeah, when you're like 4% body fat and you're standing up for like 3-4 hours, because if you sit down, the tan kind of rubs off and all sort of thing.
Yep.
It's very painful. It feels like you're standing on rocks. It hurts your back. It's tiring. So I've been through all this process with spine disease, so I know as well as anyone how hard it is to prepare for competition.
And now you blokes know how us women feel when we have to shave everything all the time. You guys have it so easy. You really do. Now you know the pain. Yeah. Right, back to the chat. Annabelle's here. Hello.
Hey, Annabelle, how's it going?
Thanks for joining.
We're actually visiting Annabelle. She's about an hour away from us, and we're going to milk one of the cows at the place that she works at.
Yeah.
Jonathan's dream. We're doing it for his birthday.
And
best girlfriend ever's organized it.
Annabelle just launched a monthly, not service, but group, right? Limbic training, I think. I apologize. I should know better, but I've only loosely checked it out. So I'll be sure to look into that once we're done talking.
Yeah, so Sophie and I actually interviewed that group last night, and it was the best interview the planet has ever received. Yeah,
it is hilarious when it airs. Oh my god, get the tissues because you're going to be crying of laughter. Sure. I was. It was fantastic. The Darkfield Carnivore said, "Okay, thanks. Should I wait till that resides before going again?" Relating to his question about pain.
I think it depends how bad it is. If he's still messed up if he's messed up in bed and he's like struggling to walk up and down the stairs, yeah, you're not going to be able to train safely if you're struggling to be mobile. But if you're walking around fine, and it's just when if you like tense your bicep or you've done a bicep work and it really hurts, like you moving your arm physically hurts, then I wouldn't risk it. You could tear something. There's a muscular weakness because you can't get all the muscles firing. Essentially, it's very subjective. Like, I need to sort of live in his body to sort of be able to say exactly what the right thing to do would be. And
I suppose, unfortunately, you wouldn't know until you get to your next workout when you're doing your shoulder press or whatever it may be, and then you feel it and you're like, "Oh, a little bit too tender for my liking." Then you'll know to kind of listen to your body and stop, not to push it.
I'll admit, I probably overdo recovery. If I'm sore from my previous workout, then I won't work out again, and I'll usually give it one extra day after that just to make sure. And it's probably not as close to ideal as if I worked out a little bit more frequently, but over time, I tend to think, there's diminishing returns to your training. So over time, as you get closer to your genetic potential, those things matter less and less. So I would wait. Me personally, I wait until I'm not sore at all. I wake up that morning feeling great, and then sometimes I give it one extra day beyond that just to feel like I'm fully recovered before I go in again.
I can see that rationale. It does make sense because the more advanced you get, the more perfect you have to be to get bigger. Otherwise, you just keep doing more volume, keep training. You train 7 days a week, and you just ignore that. So obviously, there's something within the actual workout stimulus itself and the recovery side of it that you have to optimize. If you're just digging into your recovery, you'll never get the full adaptation that you're trying to get. We've been watching a lot of Mike Lentz, you can tell.
Where are we at? So Jamie's got a question. Is a sauna worth having after a heavy workout to increase hypertrophy?
Jeremy, you go first this time.
Sure. If I had access to one, I would do it. I don't think it would contribute anything significant towards hypertrophy, but just the heat stress, I think, is good for increasing your own glutathione production. And I just find saunas extremely relaxing and almost physically cleansing. So I would do it if I had access to it. But I don't think it's going to contribute anything major towards muscle growth.
Yeah, it has a slight, like you said, it's got a slight hormetic effect. whereby it's a bit like increasing reactive oxygen species. So you're effectively increasing your inflammation. The heat shock proteins within your cells will proliferate effectively. You'd have to find out subjectively how you feel before and after. So try it out for a week. Maybe you train. I know Jamie trains about once, maybe twice a week if he can. Try it out after the session. See how you feel after. It might be that it gives you a net positive. You feel better. You sleep better. You detox better. You know, if you've drunk alcohol or anything like that, then that'd be quite useful. Yeah, I think. I mean, I was doing this sort of thing when I was competing, and I had access to all these things. I was doing like some walks up and down the swimming pool after the gym. Just to it's almost like a cool down, but it's a bit of activity as well. And then I'd go into the sauna and the steam room. I'd alternate those, maybe 5-10 minutes each. It's a useful tool, I think. Just be conscious that if you're hot, you'll lose more electrolytes. Will increase first as well. So your diet would have to adapt to that as well, I think. But that's your hunger signals, and your hunger signals will tell you exactly what you need to do.
Fantastic. I hope that answers it, Jamie. Obviously, if not, then just pop it in the in the chat. So Rick has asked, is there such a thing as an infrared scanner to calculate body fat composition and location?
In terms of localized, it is possible, but I don't think one exists. My mum uses these sort of light ray things. You could measure the thickness of things using these sort of measurements, these light rays. Problem is, doing it over your whole body with a piece of equipment is going to be expensive as hell.
Yep.
You're going to need to wear something over your eyes. It's never going to be 100% accurate because you probably have some fat around the glasses that, so it will never be. I think it's an complicated way of using measuring body fat. I think you'd be better off using you can look at the mirror, do waist circumference check, so use a measuring tape. I like to use body fat calipers. You can use digital or manual with numbers on them, sort of thing. The only caveat of that is you have to know how to use them and where to use them. And once you get more skilled at using them, you do the same body part of your own every time. You get better, and is that number trending down or up? That's probably a good measurement. What do you think, Drew?
I've had a DEXA scan done before, and it cost me about $100. But at least around here, most colleges that have some kind of sports-related physiology lab will have a DEXA machine. And that'll give you they basically x-ray your body and give you a printout of how much body fat and muscle you have, and then regionally how much fat you have in all these different areas. And they can also measure bone density with it. So it's really cool, but it's not something, I guess it's useful in a sense to know, but big picture, compared to how your clothes fit, what you see in the mirror, and if you're able to do any kind of localized measurements, those are going to be significantly better over a period of time. But if you have $100 and you want to try it out, it's really, really cool.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, if you don't have a coach and you're looking to find a measurement, you can measure things. That's useful because your eyes can trick you sometimes. So I was getting my skin folds down to like 3, maybe 4 millimeters all over my body. It's tricky to see the changes, but you'll get different pockets of fat over your body. So you'll notice that as time goes on, you get more specific with your measurements. You can start to choose your own measurements to find out, is this getting leaner? And you'll notice you'll lose fat in different patterns. And it won't always be the same pattern. I mean, you'll hold more in some places hormonally, and where your genetic set points are, sort of thing. Other than that, I think your best bet is just to look in the mirror. If you're a bodybuilder, no one's going up to you on stage of a calibrator, a machine, and
checking.
I mean, if you're classic physique, they'll measure your height, but that's about it. Your weight as well. Yeah, I don't think it's the be-all and end-all.
I mean, we use Renpho scales which calculate, body fat. Again, how accurate they are, I don't know, but if you're using the same tool, then you can see a trend in it. Like, obviously, when I started, I think I got them September. So since September to now, my body fat percentage on that scale has gone down. So it's going in the right direction. Whether that percentage is actually accurate, I don't know. And I don't quite know where in the UK we could get, what like Jerome did.
I know where we can get one in Southampton. The problem with the Rempo scales that we use is they produce a trend and they're reliable, as in if it says 20% body fat, you'll get on and off it 10 times over and it'll be about the same, give or take like 0.1%. That brand seems to be the best one that I've used, my brother's used, other people have used that I know, best reviewed. But it's not perfect. It's just to produce a trend line. So saying that, when I've been in contest shape before, like striated glutes, covered in veins and stuff, it measured me out. I think it was, I want to say it was maybe like 10-11% body fat. But I was gaunt, like there's no fat to come off. I could barely walk, sort of thing. So it kind of tells me, like, okay, looking down the line, like as I'm now, it says my body fat says 18%, roughly. My brother's says about the same, but I'm quite a bit leaner than my brother. You know, if you looked at me, looked at him, you'd say, oh yeah, Jonathan's leaner. So it just says there's some individual variability where it doesn't quite measure exactly what you want or what you think you are, but it does produce a trend line.
I've lost where we are in the chat now.
Kyle Slawnwhite.
So he's asking, Rick, your interview with Dr. Chafee was great. Do you eat any amount of fruit or vegetables from time to time? And Rick has answered, I eat some fruit in season, but that can be months in between. Handy to know. Sauna's always good. Matthew, yes.
Yeah,
I wish I could do sauna.
I've got a question for you, Jerome, directed from Matthew. He hasn't asked me this, but I think it'd be helpful if he had your insight. He's looking to recover from nerve damage. What would you suggest to him in terms of any exercise, any therapies, anything that you can think of?
Is the nerve damage like systemic, or is it localized to a certain area? Because I know a lot of people get it like peripheral.
Be localized, hip, leg, sort of area, lower back.
I guess I'm a big fan of doing seated leg adduction and abduction to work the interior and more exterior muscles of the hips. So time static contraction protocol is something I use quite a bit, and not to get into it too long, but it's basically 30 seconds of a moderate effort, 30 seconds of a relatively high degree of effort, and then 30 seconds as hard as someone dares to contract their muscles. So I'll have people that I'm trying to work more of the muscles of the hip sit down on a chair or a bench with their back against a wall, and I'll put 2 yoga blocks behind their knees. I'll have them try and squeeze those blocks together with a consistent effort over 90 seconds using that protocol, increasing intensity. And then I'll usually tie a yoga belt around the outside of their knees and have them do hip abduction. In general, anything that you can do to strengthen the muscles around an area is going to have a positive carryover to those joints. So the real question then becomes, how can you safely tax those muscles with a high degree of intensity, but in a way that is relatively safe? So yeah, I would generally prefer like a leg press over a squat, do some kind of adduction, abduction, and with as much intensity as you can safely generate.
Okay, that's a fair answer, I think.
So Rebecca said, want a free sauna, just turn the air conditioner off. Yeah.
Good evening, Tom.
Darkwood Carnivore. What is considered a short/good recovery time? Should I be doing the weighted hill climbs daily, or would recovery typically take longer than 24 hours?
Sophie, what do you think? I don't want to answer all the questions first.
I mean, it's probably kind of individually dependent, because I know that I've kind of trained like 8 days accidentally in a row, completely unplanned, and each training session was as if it was my first one. But I know that if Jonathan had done that, I mean, at that point he was training obviously a lot harder than me, because I was still learning it all and I wasn't training to failure because it was in like a private gym, so it wasn't really safe for me to. But yeah, It kind of depends on your body. If like doing your hill walks isn't causing you, pain or anything like that, then continue if it's not causing an issue.
I think it's all relative. Like if he's someone that's quite fit, that's used to doing leg workouts, adding in this kind of thing every other day wouldn't be too detrimental, I don't think. It depends how far and how heavy it is, It's like one of these questions, how long is a piece of string? I think like Jerome says, if you're conscious about recovery and improving, perhaps err on the side of recovering a bit more. If you're trying to build muscle, if you're trying to lose fat, however, perhaps keep the activity in. So it's quite a fine balance. It depends what your goals are as well.
Yeah.
Yep. And I agree with everything you guys said. If it's done with a low to moderate degree of effort and it doesn't seem to be taking away from anything else, then I would keep it up daily or every other day. If that's the primary work that is being done for the lower body, or maybe something that's done to some kind of performance, if you're tracking how far you're going, the amount of time that you're spending doing it the same route, then I would probably lean towards every other day or so. But Jonathan and Sophie are 100% correct. It's going to be really highly individualized, and there's a lot of factors that go into that.
Yeah, brilliant.
Wonderful. Tom has said, I'm glad Rick is getting more exposure lately. Dave from No Carb Life, Joey, and Dr. Chafee coming up. Someone also suggested your name in one of Dr. Berry's streams. Wonderful. Kyle has got a question. Got a good knot in my left trap muscle 3 days ago. Hard to sleep and hurts during the day. Applying heat. Haven't exercised other than yoga and walking since. Should I give it some more time?
Yeah.
I think if it's causing pain, then yeah.
If it's causing pain, I mean, depends what you do. I mean, what we know about like bodybuilding training is if someone, for example, breaks their arm, they tear their bicep or something, they'll just do leg workouts. So they'll be sat on a leg press, maybe sat on a leg extension, sat on a leg curl, doing that sort of thing. Now, if it's a trap, it's heavily involved with lots of different movements around your shoulder. So it's going to be virtually every movement in your upper body. You're probably not going to put a bar on your back if it's that bad to do a squat, for example.
Yeah.
You might just give it a week or two of giving it giving your lower body some good grief, some good welly, as I call it.
Yep.
But yeah, I'd err on the side of giving it more time than less. And
he does yoga.
These things do to some extent go away. I mean, I've had knots in both my upper traps forever. I've never actually got rid of them. Even with thousands of pounds worth of therapies and massages and all sorts of things, ferro guns, nothing's worked to get rid of them. It's just the way my body seems to be aligned. Doesn't really cause me much discomfort. I don't really notice it much. I don't complain about it. So for me, it's not a big deal. What do you think, Drew?
There's a YouTube channel I like. It's two physical therapists. I think it's Bob and Brad. And their general recommendation for muscle knots is if you can sit or lay in a position where you can contract that muscle, but in a way where you're not volitionally contracting it. So if you can like posture pillows in a way to contract that part of your trap, and then either you rub it or have somebody else rub that spot gently while the muscle is contracted, but while it's not actively contracting, that can help loosen it up quite a bit. I'm pretty sure it's Bob and Brad. I'll verify that channel and I'll put it in the comments once this video is over. But they have a lot of great content with muscle knots.
That's a good shout. Yeah, I've never heard of this before, and this is why we invited Jerome on today, in case it says something new.
Well, you never know.
Never know.
But yeah, I would say, Carl, if it's causing you pain, then like we've said, err on the side of caution and recover that bit more. You're doing yoga and walking, and if that's not causing you any issues, then continue doing that. And like Jonathan says, give the legs a good welly without causing pain to your traps.
Yeah, we like a bit of leg work.
It was leg day today, actually.
You did legs.
Rick says, not sure if it's a good or bad thing. I love that everyone just chats to each other. Sheen is here. Hello. Steampunk Mama is here.
Hello, everyone.
Bad is Cat. Any other questions, guys? Get them in.
Hi, Sheena.
Get them in.
Just go through the chat now. Thanks for sharing, Sheena.
So when is your contest, Jerome?
It's late April, maybe about a 4-hour drive from here. I'd have to actually look up the specifics. I tend to be pretty single-mindedly focused on one thing at a time, so I'll reference that coming up. But
So you've got about a month
still. Yeah, a little bit more. I think it's.
Wonderful.
I think at earliest it's April 22nd. It might be a little bit later than that.
Okay, nice.
How do you rate your progression so far? Are you noticing like a linear change in your physique? Is it that you're going down, 2-3 pounds a week or something?
I think if you're, and I'm still not tracking weight really, and this has been the most kind of listening to my body preparation that I've ever done. So the previous contests that I've done, I always meticulously tracked calories, weighed myself once a week. This one I'm going a lot more instinctual. Everything is just based on the mirror and how I feel. I really need to sleep better. I can tell that that's affecting me, and I'm tired of drinking as much water and eating as much salt as I'm eating. But that's all part of the process for peak week. But it's going well, and I'll put some pictures up soon in the group, the Carnivore crew. Just want to plug that group quick for anybody who's not already in there. Jonathan and Sophie put together a really incredible group. It's like 40 pounds for 4 months, which is a steal. They're constantly on the messenger, answering questions, helping people out, posting pictures. I'm in there too. I try and take more of a back seat because this is you guys' thing. But it's a really great group of people, and it's well worth the investment, and anybody considering it should absolutely join it. We're still taking people. So I just wanted to plug that quick.
Yeah, thanks for doing that. Just to reach that payment method, it's just debit or credit card through my website, competitionconsultant.com. It's just called Carnivore Crew on the payment link. I think it should be below in the show notes. Should be. YouTube's not very reliable in that sense.
So I'll put some pictures up. Sorry, I'll put some pictures up soon of the contest prep. I'd wanted to largely keep a lot of that to myself, so when I was done, I could do a great before and after video. But I think if you're doing things right, and Jonathan and I are kind of similar, where like you can kind of see changes daily in a sense. And I think, Jonathan, you mentioned before, you can lose weight very quickly, but you can also put it on very quickly, depending on how you're manipulating your food and your training. I've always been very similar, so I can drop quite a bit of weight pretty fast.
Yeah, well, it was interesting to hear what you thought about soma types. Now, basically, for those in the chat that are listening, you have the idea that we have an endomorph physique, a mesomorph, and an ectomorph. An endomorph is someone who easily gains weight. Usually they're stockier, a bit so-called fatter. Mesomorph tends to be leaner, more athletic, usually quite strong as well. Then there's someone who's an ectomorph, who's usually, no matter how much they eat, these are the people that most of us despise. They just eat pizzas all day and they seem to retain a lean physique. What do you think about that? Do you think that there is such a thing, or do you think it's more a myriad of other things which intertwine to create people that have these kind of dispositions?
I tend to look at that like probably closer to like almost every single genetic trait is expressed along a bell curve, where there's a small set of the population that are probably very ectomorph, very, very thin, small subset, very, very thick, bigger boned, tend to carry a little bit more weight. But I tend to think most people fall into that meaty part of the curve. I'll put it in the group. I have 3 side-by-side pictures of me. One when I was like 19 and 160 pounds, super thin. One when I was 297 pounds, looking very, very endomorphic, very heavy. And then I have a picture of me at the gym at like 215 pounds, looking pretty yoked. I tend to think there's a lot more plasticity amongst the average individual based on how they train and how they eat, to where they're capable of shifting their body in quite the extreme, depending on their goals and what they're doing. So some people, we've seen them, right? Some people are stick thin and have shoulders that are this far apart. And some people are built like gorillas despite having never lifted a day in their lives. But for most people, I tend to think if you're performing an activity consistently long enough and you're eating in a way that supports that activity, your body will largely adapt to that stress.
Yeah, I think the same. I've never really met anyone personally, anyone that sort of associates with these types with that kind of tracks things meticulously. What I mean by that is I know people that say, oh, I eat pizza every day and I stay lean. It's like, but do you actually? Is it that you're just eating pizza a day every day, and that's all you're eating for the whole day? Is it that the people that are endomorphic, so over fat, so-called over fat, is it that they're actually snacking throughout the day, but they're eating loads of food, but just loads of healthy food? That could come into it as well. Then the people in the middle, I'd say I'm probably slightly in the middle, but I've also, like Jerome, been on either side of the curtain as well. I've been very thin and quite fat.
Yep.
I've just found you've learned more over time, and your tools that you have available to understand how to tweak these things. They'll get better if you take the time to understand it. I think we shouldn't have a defeatist approach and just say, I'm an endomorph, therefore it is hard for me to do this. I think that's quite a self-defeating prophecy.
Yep.
Because I think would I then be classed as an endomorph?
So if he's got more muscle than virtually every person that I know.
You're just saying that because I'm here. But it's anything's possible. Do you know what I mean? I've lost 50 kilos in 3 years, almost 3 years. Okay, had a pregnancy in between, but have kept it off. So I think, although I'm probably then classed as an endomorph, because obviously, on the larger side, that doesn't mean I'm stuck that way, because I'm, reducing the body fat, gaining muscle, changing the shape. So I think, like you say, people shouldn't be defeatist. Put your mind to something and you could, do anything, providing your body genetics actually lets you, grow specific areas. It might be that, I can't grow shoulders like a gorilla. Who knows? Where did we get to in the chat? So Kyle says, I did an in-body scan January 2021. It's pretty cool at the time. His weight 152 pounds, SMM 80 pounds, fat mass 11, BMI 22.4, 7.2% body fat. Put on more muscle since, but still very lean. Excellent.
It's good to hear. Just need some chocolate bars, I think. If you guys heard this, Dave Tate's, I think it's Dave Tate's bulking program. It's like have like 3 square meals a day. Then your last meal is like a giant 24-inch pizza. Then between each of those meals, you just eat like a giant chocolate bar.
Oh my God.
Maximum Randall cycle activation.
That sounds awful.
Make me feel ill. I used to. Well, I was never that bad, but I used to eat like that. A lot of food.
Gina might have tapeworms. That's not good.
Interesting.
Rick, I am 100% ectomorph. Christian from Zbigniew. What do you think about Mr. Mentz's HIIT system? Did I say his name right? I hope.
Yeah. Yep. Jerome and I like it because basically he kind of reversed engineered training and recovery to its simplest form. People like Arnold came about back in the day, and they sort of said, train hard, do lots and lots, and train twice a day, and do, I don't know, I think was it like a push-pull legs twice a week, whatever it was, whatever a split was, it was doing like 6 sessions a week. I mean, it'd be like running in the morning, cycling, and all sorts of things. And I was like, oh, it's ridiculous. But there's no element of tracking, like no strength progression. We can always add in more volume, but it doesn't necessarily facilitate more muscle, because if, for example, we're doing 10 sets for a given body part one session, we're not going to get exponentially more results by doing 11. There's a recovery capacity that we have as individuals. Mike Mentzer kind of explains that once we supersede that or exceed that capacity to recover, we won't get more results. So he minimalizes the training. What is the minimal effective dose of volume, intensity, whatever it is, intensifiers that we can use to trigger the muscular hypertrophy adaptation response? Then we work from there. So that's how people like Jerome, who's doing like five sets of workout 3 times a week or something.
Yeah, right about
there.
And 5 to 6 sets tops per workout, and 1 to 3 sessions a week, depending on my schedule.
Yeah. However, the problem is there's limitations to it.
Yep.
Not that the program itself is weak, but people might not understand their own measures of recovery very well. So, for example, someone might do that program, they might not understand. Okay, I should have actually given it an extra day or two. And like Joe mentioned earlier, we know strength correlates with muscular hypertrophy pretty closely. We know if we're getting stronger, we're probably getting bigger. Getting bigger is hard to recognize without having a DEXA scan every single workout every week. We know getting bigger, more muscular, takes time to almost consolidate. So it's something hard to track. But the measurement we do have, which is quite effective, is strength. So we're looking at the strength metric. So are we getting stronger from workout A to workout B? Then what is the minimal amount we have to do to get to that point? If we're exceeding that amount, we're just cutting into recovery, which makes everything a lot harder. But Mike Mentz's HIIT system is, you can effectively watch like an hour and a half of him just talking about it on YouTube on I think it's John Little's channel that Jerome kindly showed me the other day, and he just explains it very well, and it kind of makes sense when you listen to it. It's like, yeah, people probably have been doing it wrong for a long time. The caveat is you have to know how to train hard.
Yep.
So when you're training like this, it's very hard for me as a coach to promote or put someone on this plan without seeing how they train.
Yep.
Because if they're going to do 4 sets and they're 4 rubbish sets, they're not to complete muscular failure. They're not going to get that adaptive response. So I err on the side of caution, sort of say train. Everyone that's seen a plan for me say, train to muscular failure or very close to. Here's an example of a video where I train pretty much close to it using technical muscular failure, I call it. People can watch that and say, am I hitting this or not? No. All right. Well, you're going to be more on a baseline kind of almost like generic workout where you might be doing more volume to stimulate the muscle growth, but it's never quite perfect. So what I say to clients is feedback what you're doing in the gym to me. Tell me how you're feeling. Do you feel hungry? Do you feel tired? Are your joints aching? These are all things that I'd listen to and say, okay, this is what you need to do from here. But part of the feedback that I find difficulty getting is the video side of it. So the critical analysis of the video. The way we build muscle in bodybuilding is we train. The way Usain Bolt would get faster is he'd run. He'd have a sports performance scientist or a coach look at him running in the gym, in the track, whatever it was, and say, okay, you need to work on your sprint start, your form, your posture. You need more ballistic strength. Maybe there's a certain part of the race you need to improve upon. The same is true when you're trying to build strength to build muscle. You need to identify the weak point in your training. And that's why I always say to people, show me your training. But I think I've probably had 2 people in the last 4 months, other than Sophie, that I coach that show me training footage of any kind. So that's why it's very hard for me to really nail down the perfect training system for the person. But we can't always film ourselves in the gym. It's quite tricky, and there's people running around. It's quite a personal kind of thing. So
yeah, some people don't like to. I know that when I first filmed one of my sets, even though I worked out by myself, well, except the kids, nobody was looking at me filming myself, but I still felt so awkward doing it. And I don't know why, because it's you can't keep track of what you're doing, making sure the form's correct. You can't kind of analyze your workout if you don't record it. And that was by myself, do you know what I mean? Let alone in a public gym where you've got people walking in and out and through the camera shot.
Jerome's probably the best person to speak about Mr. Mike Mentz's HIIT system. He's probably the most researched person. He's probably watched his videos on loop and playback about 1,000 times over in the last week. So Jerome, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, Mike, I give Mike a lot of credit. I kind of say that he posthumously probably saved my life. I started training heavy duty years ago, 2013, 2014, a little bit after my daughter was born, because it was literally the only training routine that I had time to try. Before then, I was training 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 45 to 60 minutes of workout, and I would do 6 to 9 total sets per body part. My schedule at the time was quite busy, so I started training heavy duty, and I found very quickly that while I was quite strong before that, I was continuing to build strength, and I had easily eclipsed what were my previous best lifts despite exercising for a fraction of the time. I'm a big proponent of a lot of the principles of heavy duty, but I caveat needs to be said that any routine that Mike or anyone in like the Body by Science camp, or if I gave someone a routine or if Jonathan gave someone a routine, that's a starting point. That's the skeleton to hang the meat on, and then based on how somebody's body responds, their personal preferences, and their execution of those movements, then things need to be personalized and adjusted over time. So the reason I stopped training heavy duty is I was getting so strong on my bench squat and my deadlift that I had to look at those numbers and say there's a certain amount of risk to some of these movements. A deadlift can be a really positive, productive movement, but if you're deadlifting 500 plus pounds consistently, the slightest breach of form and you could be in chronic pain for the rest of your life. So I started looking into other ways using those high intensity training principles. Are there safer ways to continue to reap the strength and hypertrophy benefits of exercise, but do so in a way where I don't have to worry about screwing up my lower back for the rest of my life? So heavy duty is still a subset of high intensity training. And as long as you're in training, with enough intensity, as long as you're training progressively and then giving your body in terms of what it needs for rest and recovery and supplementing that with a decent diet, you'll get results pretty much no matter how you train. You just need to adhere to those principles.
Yeah, that's good advice. It's the old safety element, isn't it, of training?
Yeah.
We kind of, the more you put in, the more you get out. But also the higher the risk of injury.
Yep.
That's why people like Jerome and myself like machines. I can drop a weight, train maximally, and not die. I've been saying this a lot recently. I really want to get the point across. You don't have to do free weights.
No.
Yeah.
Just go through the chat. Oh, we got a question from Nathan. Hello, Nathan. Have any of you had experience using leucine as a supplement? The Q&A you had the other day with Colt and Mark was interesting when you spoke about creatine use. Jerome, do you have leucine?
No, I've never used leucine, so I can't speak about it.
Okay, I've used leucine and HMB separately in isolation, alongside a high protein diet, and I can say I didn't notice any significant benefit. The blood glucose response as a result of using these things was no different. It seems that it tends to peak out. Other than that, I think leucine could be useful for someone perhaps like my grandmother. She's 92 years old nearly. She doesn't eat a lot of meat. If she wants to retain some muscle mass, stimulate protein synthesis, it'll be very useful. I think people like us that are using things like leucine, we're getting enough in the meat that we eat. You don't need an awful lot. I think there is a grammage amount that they recommend. It's somewhere between like 2 and 5 grams per meal. I think you can probably get a marginal increase in protein synthesis, which is what people use it for. If you're using it, if you're having protein 4 times per day. But when I say marginal, I mean it's not at all essential. The point here, which I say in a lot of videos, I've said this a lot recently, is it depends how much you have to eat. Eddie Hall is not going to be eating OMAD. But then Dorothy, who's doing chair aerobics workout, and she's 92 years old, she might be doing OMAD. I think it's a scalability based on size and output. So the more output you have, I think the more sensitivity you have to stimulate muscle protein synthesis, and that's through the leucine intake. That's probably the best answer you'll get online, I think, in like a minute. Just so you know.
And I think you nailed it. Like leucine is, that's the primary amino acid responsible for stimulating mTOR, right? And from what I've seen, something like 20-ish grams of animal protein in a meal gets you relatively close to getting like the maximal stimulus, at least with mTOR. And there's diminishing results over that. I think Menno Hesselmans has a great article on that. Like 40 grams of animal protein doesn't give you much more muscle protein synthesis than 20 grams. But again, that's going to be highly individualized, and you're 100% right, like with Eddie Hall.
Yeah, it's Well, if we look at the smallest person having 20 grams, so in these studies, it's just like an average person, maybe 20 grams will do the job. Someone Nathan's size, maybe 30, 40 grams. I know Nathan personally, I know he's eating about that per meal anyway, so he's going to be hitting it just fine, and he's not going to need to supplement. Wasting his money. Best to spend money on consultations, I think, with myself to ask more good questions.
Exactly. Excellent question, Nathan.
Very good question.
Hopefully that was answer to your standard. Just quickly, I don't think there's any more questions in the chat. It's just you guys chit-chatting to each other.
I think Sheen asked something earlier, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, that was the one.
Yeah.
That was it. Yeah, I had this up, but I wasn't sure if it was a question. So she said, I'm so confused on protein. My dad, when was alive, was a bodybuilder. He preached high protein. Now I'm hearing like 70 grams. Can you explain this? It depends how much muscle breakdown you have. So it's very hard to give a broad outline of what someone should have. So people like myself, Jerome, or Bart K, Professor Bart K, would each have a guideline amount for the average trainer. If you're male or female, that might change it. If you're very active, if you're doing, I don't know, like rucking, like lots of hill walks, like Dartfield Carnivore was doing, that might mean that amount goes up. If you're then adding weight training, that amount might go up a bit. If you're doing Jerome's workout, which is 5 sets, 6 sets, maybe 3 times a week, that's less than what you're currently doing. That might go down. It's a hard thing to nail because the studies on protein intake are quite weak. Ideally would have like me go into a lab and say, okay, this is what 6'1" a top amateur bodybuilder can do with his body eating this much protein. These are his blood markers, whatever. That's ideally what we'd be able to do. It's not really possible to do that in a way that it wouldn't translate to a lot of people, because what I perceive as training hard or high volume might be different to what someone else might be doing. So Sophie might be doing half the volume, but if she's more active, if she's picking up Maddie all day, bending down, do all the extra footwork sort of thing, then she might have a similar high protein requirement to me. So it's tough to measure, but I think I've personally not had a single client on less than 100 grams of protein a day and less than 100 grams of fat. And I'm saying this from the point as I've just not noticed this, because that's just where people seem to fall.
Yeah,
that's the bare minimum. There will be some people that are outliers, but it depends what they're doing, There's also interplay between the fat amount as well. So if you're supporting your workouts and they're intense with gluconeogenesis through protein consumption, then you might need less fat than if you don't have that. So if you're more what Jerome's doing, where he's having less protein, he's running off fat effectively as his main entire fuel source, then his fat intake will be higher as a result of this. So you have your protein and fat grams, separate things. Then you have that sort of narrow margin in the middle, which kind of is affected by how high or how low either of those amounts are.
Yep.
What do you think, Jerome?
Yeah, I think I'm 100% with you. As a general guideline, I don't think anyone should, barring some extreme situation, ever eat less than about 100 grams of protein a day. I would think, for most people, a bare minimum. I eat a little bit less usually on non-training days, and I know I'm in a minority, but there's also people that, like the people that have epilepsy or do therapeutic ketogenic diets, eat relatively low protein. They're kind of their own group, so it doesn't really apply. But the days that I train, I eat more protein. I might eat 100 to 150 grams a day on days that I train, and then I kind of follow my appetite, and that tends to be between 70 and 100 grams a day on days that I don't train. But if I notice that doing contest prep now, if my strength starts going down, I would definitely increase my protein. But yeah, as a minimum, generally no less than 100 grams a day. A good starting point for most people is usually just going to be about 1 gram of protein to 1 gram of fat, and then you can adjust based on that. But that's usually going to put most people well over whatever minimum threshold of protein they need. In general, there's an expression I like that says too little protein is definitely a thing, but too much really isn't. And you could go way over with supplements, but if you're following a carnivore diet, I tend to lean pretty heavily in that direction.
Yeah, we had an interesting conversation yesterday with my myself, Colt, and Mark, we all had slightly different viewpoints on this. So the idea was that the question was, what should you eat first? Was it fat or protein? And I kind of said protein, because you have an amount that you have to have. You kind of have. I think protein, by the etiology of its Greek origins, means the first thing to have.
Yep.
So we know that. So it's kind of teaches me something there. But then I think the body has a way of limiting how much we can eat. Now, obviously, if we're only eating protein, so just doing rabbit starvation style diet, then yeah, we're going to be able to eat a lot of protein, but we're going to feel a lot of discomfort digestively, headaches, brain fog, nauseous, not feel good. So our body will tell us. So I think if we listen to that, it should be fine. Then if we eat fat to satiety, we should be fine as well. I think that with fat, we can always store more fat. We can't store more protein, at least not in a health conscious way. We can't just eat a kilo of protein powder and gain a kilo of protein on our body like muscle. We can eat a kilo of fat and it will just mean we gain a bit more fat. There's less danger to it. Whereas with the protein, it will convert to glucose through gluconeogenesis. That's a problem in itself. So you get the high insulin glucagon ratio, you get the glycation happening, which does happen downstream. I think there's a good, better, and best case scenario for a lot of these things. I mean, we're going into this in quite a lot of detail as we do, but this is kind of rambling. So you guys have signed up for this.
We love a ramble. And as there isn't any other questions in the chat, Darkfield Carnivore has just put a Q, so I think he's now typing out a question, I'm assuming.
I guess
everyone else
I found that question a little interesting yesterday because it made me wonder how people are structuring their plates to where they're kind of prioritizing more of one over the other. Like I eat a lot of beef patties and like you're getting fat and protein in the same bite. Sometimes I'll add a little bit of extra fat, but part of me is thinking like you're kind of getting both at the same time. And if I eat a steak, like a New York strip that's maybe a couple inches tall, I'll just eat across the steak, even though it has that fat strip on the backside. So I guess I just didn't understand that question when it popped up, because I'm thinking like with the food that I eat, if I'm eating eggs, if I'm eating beef, like I don't know if I can really prioritize one of those more so than the other, unless I start adding butter, sour cream, maybe yogurt or some of these other things. I think for most people, I feel like I don't know how much that necessarily applies.
Yeah, see what you mean. Foods I eat are all mixed protein and fat anyway. And what I put in all my clients' diets is try to keep your meals as close to protein and fat in terms of a balance as possible. For example, don't eat just a stick of butter for breakfast, then eat a protein powder shake, like whey isolate for lunch. I think that's not the best way to do it. I think it doesn't seem to make sense from a health perspective and in terms of like building muscle perspective either. But yeah, that was interesting because I quite enjoyed that particular topic. I don't know if I was frustrated or what the right word is, but I kind of I said something which contradicted what they said. And I kind of said, this is what I think. And I was kind of hoping they'd give me their rebuttal. And I want to learn as well. So I want to learn, you've said that, but I still disagree. So what's the drawing line there? What is the correct answer? Because I was kind of thinking, I think this is the right way, but these two guys are quite well experienced. They know what they're talking about. Am I missing out on something here? Am I being stupid or what? Like what? I wanted them to say, well, I haven't thought of this, and I'd have an opportunity to learn something, which would be quite nice.
Yeah.
I don't see another question. Jonathan, I know I messaged you earlier. Sheena brought something up, I think, on the last time I was on here live, where she mentioned kind of like a body weight set point. Do you think that people generally have set points and that they're able to kind of move that or possibly change that set point? Or do you think that most people are either stuck at a weight or they can just do whatever with their weight? Because within like the body by science camp, it's usually seen that it's all about calories. And I hate the way that this group does diet, and that your body doesn't have a set weight. And if you're just in a deficit, you'll lose weight. And if you're not losing weight, then you're messing it up somehow and you're not in a deficit. So I was curious about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that we do have our ideal body weight, and that means, as vague as it sounds, it's what our body feels naturally best to do. Meaning, if, for example, I was someone that required excess body fat because I was chronically under stress, my diet pattern was up and down. I'd eat, then not eat for weeks on end, and eat again. Perhaps I had famine, I was hibernating, sort of thing. I was in different extreme sort of weather conditions. Then maybe I'd have to store my body fat, so my body fat set point will be higher. And I think you can move the needle on it, like the dial, to if for example my natural set point is, if I didn't go to the gym, just walking around as it was, my normal appetite, maybe 15% body fat or something like that. I think that's quite normal for me. But I think you can push that down or up depending on your output. So I think depends how much stress you're under. I mean, if you're stressed, your body's using up a lot of vitamins and minerals and things. So, if we can put less stress in our system, we're going to make it easier for our body to adapt to the right body fat or muscular set point that there is.
Yeah,
it's quite a tricky sort of question to answer, but I understand what she means. And
yeah, because I tend to, and tell me if you disagree. I tend to think that everybody does kind of have a set place where their body feels best, but I think you can change that set point. So I think if if someone was 250 pounds and they got down to like 220 and then stayed at 220 for like 4 to 6 months, I tend to think everything would kind of rebalance. And then from there, they could start losing again to where perhaps earlier they were having trouble getting past 220 on the scale at some point. That's just my own speculation.
I think there is a consolidation phase in any adaptive weight that we gain or lose. So, for example, I know most pro bodybuilders, they aren't looking to bulk up for 2 weeks to be 300 pounds, then drop it again for stage. They maintain that weight for as long as possible until their body realizes, okay, this is my safe, natural, normal weight. Being muscular, strong to perform my given activities. I think you'd probably hold on to more muscle if you held onto that weight for longer. But obviously not at the expense of reducing insulin sensitivity, becoming unhealthy, causing any sort of damage. And I think that if you're going to sort of try to maintain a leaner state, get to that leaner state, find a way of making it easy for your body to stay there. So find a way of not doing 20,000 steps a day, not doing an hour of cardio or sprints, not doing 2 hours of weights every day. Make it easy for your body. Make it think, okay, I'm fine at this point, and just stay there for a few months. I think that's probably the best thing. But yeah, I've noticed myself as years have gone on, I've maintained a leaner physique much easier. So, you learn more about recovery and diet as time goes on.
Yeah.
We've got one last question. Yeah. No problem at all. My pleasure.
Yeah, sorry, Darkfield Carnivore. I was reading back through to see if I could find it, which is what I was staring down this way for, but I couldn't see it. So you've retyped it.
Yeah, sometimes they don't pop up. It's not us.
No, I couldn't.
I checked it on my feed as well.
Just wanting to confirm that 1 kilo of lean beef, 10% fat, contains roughly 200 grams of protein.
Sounds about right. If it's raw, if you cook it, that 1 kilo of lean beef might be 800 grams. It might be still 200 grams of protein because it's just the water you've lost. Jerome's done an experiment on this, actually, haven't you?
Yeah, I need to do it more to try and get really consistent. So I was just blowing up Jonathan's phone one of these nights, telling him how I was trying to figure out how much fat you lose by pan frying a beef patty, but then also how much water evaporates out of the pan as well. Because I assume that most of the protein is going to stay in there unless you're losing a little bit of myoglobin when you cut the beef open. So I'll do that with a couple more patties, weigh them out. I was weighing stuff down to the gram before and after cooking, and I'll get back to you on that. But the USDA has some data suggesting if you take like 85-15 beef and you grill it, the amount of fat that renders off, you lose something like 7 grams of fat for every 4 ounces of beef that you're cooking. And granted, I don't have a bomb calorimeter, so I can't be precise with how much I'm actually losing, but I'd like to kind of have a loose idea because of how like mathematic my brain tends to work.
Yeah.
But I don't, at the same time, maybe I'm just looking for an excuse to blow up your phone when it's 11 o'clock or midnight your time.
So you're the one blowing up his phone. Thank God for that.
Yeah, it's me.
He does stop replying.
Fine.
Yeah.
He does stop replying after a while when he knows I've got to get my beauty sleep. Now, one thing I like to do, Jerome, is I think I might have mentioned this before, is if you go to the store and you buy 95% lean beef, ground beef, it's not much fat's going to come off. It's pretty dry anyway. What you can then do, just to be a bit more accurate, the margin of error is a bit less. Just add in fat to that. So if you have butter or something, you just get your 10 grams of butter and put that on top of it and just spoon it, or just spoon the butter itself.
And most of the time, if I'm pan frying, after I put the beef patty in my plate, I'll dump the fat on top. The closer this contest gets, I've stopped doing that. And that's kind of my way to reduce energy intake a little bit. But in general, it's usually what I do.
You'll be eyeballing it and wishing you had it in a few weeks.
Yeah, don't put that thought in my head.
Excellent experiment, though. We love a good experiment, don't we?
I did the same thing a few years. Yeah, I did it steaming and baking chicken. I did the same with beef as well. Nathan's got this is the last question we're going to get to tonight, guys, because I said we're done an hour. We're done an hour 11. So unless someone sends me a super chat to make it worth my time, then I'm not going to answer anymore.
So Nathan says, how deep should the range of movement ideally be on a leg press?
I got this question. Sophie's not. I don't think you've ever used a leg press.
No, I did when I went to the spa with Sarah.
Right.
Once.
Yeah. So it depends on the angle of the seat itself. So if, for example, your thigh is laying parallel to the ground when you're sat on the leg press, and your backrest is, say, I don't know, 60 degrees, where that mountain is, that will affect obviously how far your knee travels in terms of relation to your body. If it depends on a few things. You've got your lower back, which will come off the pad if you go too far.
Yep.
I do not like this at all. I think this will give you some sort of spine disease, maybe.
Some sort of spine pain.
Yeah, and I think that also it can cause other issues as well. So it can cause you some strain around your groin, maybe your hamstrings if they're tight, especially around the lower part of the glute and that sort of lower area. I think also it depends how far up the pad your feet are. So if you've got quite high stance, it might mean that you're almost folding yourself over. So that could be quite problematic. Whereas if your knees and your feet are traveling in the correct position, so you're getting good muscular activation when you're at your believed or perceived bottom of the movement, that should be fine. But if you're then getting to a point where your glutes are coming off the pad, I think that's dangerous and problematic. So you need to find what we call in bodybuilding or just training, strength training, is active range of motion. So there's a few ways you can test for this. So the best way probably to do it is to video yourself or get someone that knows what we're talking about to video you and look at it. See, does your back come off the pad? Does your glutes come off the pad? Does it cause your spine ultimately to round forward? It's very unsafe. Other than that, you might have ankle mobility issues. Myself, I've got very good mobility in my lower body, considering. So I can actually get my calves like back to front near enough. We can get my hamstrings in all sorts of positions and quads in different positions as well. But that's my own range of motion. Other thing to look at as well is a lot of people tend to. Now, this is quite a contentious topic. No one ever talks about it, but I think it is a contentious topic to talk about. So when you're doing heavy leg press, you require a lot of oxygen to make your muscles work and perform work exercise. So when you breathe in very deeply, your gut will expand. So that can cause a limitation in your range of motion. So if I'm like breathing out like here, like that, my gut's out here. Well, ideally it wouldn't be, but if it means my knees can't travel as far back. I'm not really in the scene. My knees can't travel as far back. So that means that I'm limited, not by my range of motion in the muscle I'm trying to work, but by my gut. So that means either one, you need to be less fat, or two, you need to work on controlling your midsection, your breathing when you're doing the exercise. That's all I can think of for now. What do you think, Jerome?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That was one of the first things I thought of, is enough to where you don't obstruct your breathing. And a lot of that's going to depend on machine design, foot position, foot width, mobility. You're 100% right on those. As a general guideline, I usually don't have people in my studio go below a 90-degree angle formed by the lower leg. I don't think there's too much more benefit to going lower than that. If somebody's squatting or if somebody has the mobility, one thing I don't like to see is the hamstrings coming into contact with the calves. I think that can potentially cause a significant amount of shear in the knee. I think it's a bad idea. So like if you have, the upper and lower leg form a fulcrum at the knee, but when those two come together, you now have a new fulcrum where the pads of my fingers are touching and the knee ends up opening up. It ends up prying open. So you don't have to go ass to grass on your squats or your leg presses. In a lot of ways, maybe you shouldn't. But there's a lot that goes into that question. So if in doubt, I only go down to about 90 degrees on a leg press and really control that bottom position of the range of movement. Because as you're nearing full extension, your moment arm essentially goes to almost zero and you can hold a really significantly heavy amount of weight. If able, I would highly recommend starting a leg press from the bottom position if you can safely load into a machine that way. A lot of leg presses you can't, like the 45-degree angle ones, because otherwise, if you're just blindly loading up a leg press and you're starting in the strongest position, when you get down near the bottom where you're most susceptible to injury, you may not have a proper understanding of how much weight it's going to be in that particular position. So if you have a good like Nautilus horizontal leg press, you can begin the range of movement from the bottom. Otherwise, depending on where the safety bars are that you can set the limited range of movement, I would highly recommend starting at the bottom of the leg press. That just makes the whole movement a lot safer.
That's good advice. Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up because I kind of already knew this, but I never really thought to apply it. Like, especially now, it's more important for me to be more conscious of these things when I'm actually training. So when I next get on a leg press, I need to make sure I'm loading it in such a way that when I get into it, that is the bottom of the movement.
Yeah.
So I know that is my active range of motion. I cannot go below that. And that's just me adjusting the forward or backwards angle of it. That makes sense, the pivot. Or the track of it. Yeah, that's a good point.
Sadly, I don't think I'm going to get many chances to use a leg press.
Well, I've got train tracks driving from the base of my spine whenever I push something against it. So that's enough warning signals for me that I've done too much. So it's it doesn't hurt, but it's actually the pins and bolts at the bottom of my spine. They dig against the skin on the outside. So if I did a really heavy belt squat, for example, that would tear through my skin.
Yeah.
I laugh, but it's not funny.
And that's a shame too, because like with your ability to load weight through the hips on a belt squat, I much greatly prefer a belt squat to most leg presses or most squat movements. But
that's the limitation I have. So I explain to people, and I show people in the gym I was training at recently. I was like, "This is my back. This is where my decision points are. I got bolts here. I can't put a belt here. I can't do it. It hurts too much." So
as long as you know, it's
Last question from Sheena. It's a quick one. Jerome, do you do live streams on your channel?
I do, but I need to get better at scheduling them. Usually, if there's something I want to talk about, I'll just go live and do it. And I figure whoever wants to catch it will catch it if they're able. So yes, but it's probably been a couple of weeks since I've done one. I've been doing a lot of reading on motor learning and skill specificity. I mean, that's kind of the next live that I want to do. But that's been quite exhaustive. So eventually I'll do one of those.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I'm glad I just focus on like body composition stuff, not so much athlete stuff. But most of my qualifications actually in regards to training are through athletic performance. I'm not bodybuilding, but obviously the diet, the nutrition side is, well, a lot of it is body composition and performance anyway. But yeah, it's funny. I just never really took much fancy towards that sort of thing. But as I'm sort of going about it, I'm now thinking there's probably a market out there for people that are trying to become better at their specific sport. I'm missing out on that. So yeah, brilliant. Closing thoughts, Sophie?
Well, it's been a fantastic live today, I think, and it's a pleasure as always having Jerome on here with us.
I appreciate you guys having me. Thank you.
You're welcome anytime.
Very good. Take care, everyone.
You too.